London, a city whose streets have witnessed centuries of history, where political decisions are made, and whose landmarks symbolize power and legacy. But today, one of those streets presents an unusual scene. On Whitehall, echoing with the resonance of white stone walls, an extraordinary crowd has gathered. It's a clear, sunny day in April, and the sound of engines rises, mingling with the echoes of the past. This isn't a motorcycle parade, it's a powerful protest led by thousands of people, most of them veterans, who have come together to defend their honour and the legacy of their service. On April 18th, 2025, the group known as Rolling Thunder, made up of former military personnel and their supporters, took to the streets in what became not just a march, but a reckoning, a reminder, and a form of resistance. At the heart of the demonstration lies a law, the Northern Ireland Troubles, Legacy and Reconciliation Act, which came into effect in 2023, was designed to grant conditional immunity to those who served during the decades-long conflict in Northern Ireland known as the Troubles, spanning from the 1960s to 1998. According to its defenders, it was unjust to judge soldiers who acted under orders during wartime by today's legal and moral standards. The law sought to protect those who had served the state in extreme conditions from being prosecuted decades later. But, as with any controversial issue, there's another side to the story. The current government's attempt to repeal parts of this law has been viewed by victims' families and human rights advocates as a long overdue step towards justice. In their view, whether one was a soldier or a civilian, if a crime was committed, if a life was unjustly taken, it must be examined. Justice, they argue, has no expiry date. Serving the state does not absolve one of responsibility. For many, these events still represent open wounds. And so, at the crossroads of these conflicting narratives, the Rolling Thunder movement was born. Protesters say, "We followed orders, we served when called." And now, years later, we are being asked to answer for decisions made in the chaos of conflict. That is not justice. Many among them have lost comrades, carry physical and emotional scars, and now feel abandoned. For them, this protest is not only a stand against policy, it is a call to be seen, heard, and remembered by the society they once protected. As engines roared through Whitehall, traffic ground to a halt. Onlookers lined the pavements, some filming the moment, others watching in silence. Flags were held high, uniforms proudly worn, and some carried photos of lost friends. Their expressions were solemn, marked by pain, resilience, and unspoken stories. The protest ended in Parliament Square with emotional tributes. Speeches were made. A moment of silence was observed. Tears and applause filled the square. Yet beyond the ceremony lay a deeper question. Was this protest an obstruction to justice, or a different version of it? For those who served, the idea of being prosecuted for past actions feels like betrayal, a severing of their bond with the state. But for victims' families, justice still feels elusive. To some, these veterans are avoiding accountability. To others, they are the very people who sacrificed everything for the country's stability. Among the British public, consensus is far from clear. Some support the veterans, viewing them as heroes. Others advocate for due process and the rule of law. Media coverage, social media debates, and political statements reflect a society split on how to deal with its past. As such, it's difficult to label this protest as entirely right or wrong. The truth, perhaps, lies somewhere in between. The government has yet to make a definitive move. But what Rolling Thunder has made clear is this: coming to terms with the past is never simple, especially when that past involves asking those who served to now stand trial. Will this protest make a difference? Will the laws change? Will justice be served for everyone? Only time will tell. But what happened today in London was not just about a legal clause. It forced the nation to re-examine its collective memory. Thousands of voices rose in unison to remind us that the past must neither be glorified blindly nor condemned entirely. True justice may well lie in navigating the space between the two. Westminster, not just the heart of London, but the symbolic heart of British democracy. Parliament, Downing Street, and the government's highest offices sit here. For Rolling Thunder to hold their protest in this space was more than a logistical choice. It was a powerful statement. Veterans stood directly in front of the institutions they once served, demanding to be heard. In this way, staging the protest in Westminster amplified their message and lent it historical weight. However, not everyone viewed this location choice positively. For some, holding such a loud, disruptive protest in one of the most iconic and tourist-heavy areas of the capital was inappropriate. The engine noise, the crowds, it interrupted daily life and raised questions about balance between public expression and public order. Some critics even suggested that using Westminster as a pressure tool risked politicizing a sensitive legal issue. So, while the protest location delivered an unmistakable "we are here" message, it also sparked legitimate debate about the time, place, and method of the demonstration itself. And now, Westminster's streets fall quiet once again. The roar of motorbikes has faded, the crowds have dispersed, and only the traces of the day remain on the pavements. But what lingers isn't just tire marks or discarded placards, it's something deeper, a resonance that reminds us just how fragile, how complex, and how emotional this country's relationship with its past, its values, and its conscience truly is. What you've just seen wasn't merely a protest, it was a narrative told by those who have walked the tightrope between duty and justice. Decades ago, they were young men following orders, deployed in conflict, risking their lives for the very institutions they stood before today. Now, some of them return not to be celebrated, but to plead, not for glory, but to be understood. And perhaps the hardest part of this whole story is this: everyone believes they are right, and maybe, in their own way, they are. On one side, stand those who say justice must be equal, and justice must be blind. They argue that brushing the past under the carpet does not heal, it infects. That accountability is not revenge, but responsibility. That human rights apply to all, soldier and civilian alike. That no uniform, however proudly worn, should shield a person from the truth. On the other side are those who wore that uniform, who didn't ask to be sent, but went anyway, who lost friends, who came home changed, and who now face the prospect of being judged for actions taken in moments of chaos. For them, this is not about legality, it's about loyalty, it's about trust, about not being abandoned by the state they served. That's why the Rolling Thunder protest was more than a demonstration. It was a cry not just to government, but to the entire nation, a question thrown at each of us. How should we reckon with our past? Do we forget? Do we forgive? Do we prosecute? Or do we try to understand? These questions don't come with easy answers, but they confront us with our own principles. Our sense of justice, of history, of identity. Today in Whitehall, the streets weren't filled just with former soldiers. They were filled with symbols of remembrance, of trauma, of defiance, and of longing for closure, for clarity, for recognition. Yes, the protest ended, but the issue, it's still very much alive. And the real question is, will this protest change anything? A law, a policy, public opinion, or will it simply fade away, as so many moments in history do? Noted, but unresolved. That's not for me to answer. It's for you. Because how a country grows is not just measured in its economy, or its technology, or its global influence, but in how it chooses to remember and confront its own reflection. So I ask you, not as viewers, but as fellow citizens of a shared history, what do you believe? Should a soldier be held accountable decades after the fact? Is justice something we owe to the past, or only to the present? And can a nation truly move forward if it hasn't faced its own shadows? If this video has made you pause, reflect, or question, then we've already achieved something. Don't let the conversation end here. Comment, share, discuss. Talk to someone, ask them what they think, because this isn't just about soldiers or politicians or laws, it's about us. This is a story about memory, about legacy, and about how we as a society choose to make sense of the complicated, uncomfortable, and often painful truths that live in our history books and in the lives of those who were there. Perhaps you're confused, perhaps you're conflicted. That's okay, maybe that's even necessary, because sometimes the journey towards truth doesn't begin with knowing the answers. It begins by daring to ask the right questions. And if you believe, like we do, that stories like this matter, that remembrance matters, then stay with us. Subscribe, share, let your voice be heard. This is just the beginning, because history doesn't only speak through books or monuments or official speeches. Sometimes history screams in silence, in tire tracks, in tears, in quiet defiance, and in crowded streets. And today was one of those days.